Okay, a couple cool things about today's show. One is I've got a really good friend of mine here with me. Two, if you're watching the video, you'll see that we're actually in studio. We're doing, I think, the second time I've ever done an in-person video. So it's going to be a little awkward looking at the camera and looking at Kurt and trying to figure this thing out. But let me tell you why I have the guest that I have today. I've known Kurt Greening for 20 some odd years now. I met him when I had a job at a tech company. And, if you've been listening for a long time, I started my career kind of late in life. Kurt was 24 years old. He had the same job I did. And I was in awe because when I was 24, I was on my way to homeless and trying to figure things out. And here's a guy who has got his shit together and is crushing it at a career that I'm just holding my fingers on. And what I watched is Kurt go from individual contributor to a sales manager. And we're going to talk about some of the bumps there. And then he, becoming an actually really good leader. So an individual contributor, an expert at what he does, and then trying to figure out how to transfer that to other people. Officially, and by the way, you just sit there and look at the camera and smile while I do your introduction, right?
Sounds great, Mark.
Officially, Kurt Greening is the Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Securus. Kurt comes to Securus with an MBA in marketing and over 20 years of experience leading teams. 20 years, dude. I can't believe I've known you this long. Leading sales teams, lines of businesses, digital transformation initiatives at companies such as NetApp, Palo Alto Networks, Agility. Kurt's mission with Securus is to increase customer satisfaction, build the Securus brand, and expand our company's client list. He's hiring, by the way. If you don't know what Securus does, they recycle electronics for organizations because they care about data security and the environmental impact. Kurt, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. This is super fun, Mark.
This is great because it just compresses 20 some odd years. Yeah. I think it was like 2001 or 2002. It was before 9/11.
I think 2001, definitely before 9/11.
Because we'll talk about, you taught me something about sales right after 9/11 that I'll never forget. But when I met you, you were young to have that kind of a job.
Yeah.
And we were joking before the mic went on that you had some jobs before that.
Yeah.
When did you start in sales?
So I started in sales, believe it or not, Mark, before I was 21. And one of my biggest fears in my first sales job is we had to go to company happy hours. It was required. So I was worried about getting carded. What if I got carded? And what if I got fired? That was one of my biggest fears.
Did they know you were under 21?
I'm not sure that it was ever discussed, but happy hours were required. And that was a big fear of mine.
And how did it work out?
It did not get carded. Apparently, if you show up with a bunch of people wearing a suit, you're unlikely to get carded. That was back in the olden days. Maybe different today.
You looked young though. You did look young. So I'm curious. You come into when you and I worked at NetApp. A lot of people were already family oriented. Already married, kids, that kind of thing. How did you kind of assimilate yourself into people who were in a different place in life for you?
That's a great question. I think at that point, I was probably super focused on myself, which wasn't the best thing. There were some relationships that I think I built. Obviously, we build a relationship, but that probably has more to do with you seeking it out and knowing that that's something that I needed and I would benefit from. Than me saying like, hey, I really want to focus on these relationships. I'm not sure if I was smart enough when I was young to know how valuable that was and how much I would need it.
That's, again, one of the things that impressed me about you. When I first met you, you actually weren't relationship oriented. You were smarter than everybody else. You were more driven than everybody else, and you could do it yourself. And I think one of our early conversations, which I think started our friendship, was me sharing with you that maybe you want to be nice to the people around you because people would want to help you.
I mean, I got to be quite honest, Mark. Like, I was surprised when you had these very close and deep relationships with your customers, and I'm like, I looked at these people maybe who went out and spent 4 hours with customers golfing, and I said, why would you invest 4 hours in one relationship when you have 100 customers that you need to close. So yeah, I think I had a lot to learn in those areas, Mark.
Yeah, no, it was good, but and that was what was so cool is you learned it because when I went back to some of your customers afterwards, uh, they were unshakable that they knew you had their best interests at heart always. Like, oh, every single time, like you developed that. Do you remember kind of learning to create those relationships?
I mean, I think initially I was just really focused on serving them incredibly well. Um, but over the long term, what I realized is what I liked most about my job was those relationships. I mean, I can, some people that we know in common, people like Jonas Hirschfield. If you ask me, what am I most proud of? Like all I sold to him and places that he worked, or that we're friends 20 years later. And I can barely remember what we sold, but there's just such a bond there that we care about each other and we're great friends. And if you ask, like, what am I proud of in my career, it's
Mhm.
how did I help somebody, and then what relationships exist beyond whatever the business relationship was.
Yeah, when I first became a coach, my first 6 clients were former customers,
Wow.
and a lot of them said, "I don't even know what coaching is, but
Yeah.
whatever you're doing," right? So that's a testament. So I remember distinctly when you decided. Again, you were just such a good sales guy. So with the rising leader, we talk about people being really good at what they
Mhm.
do, and how do they now translate that to success through others.
Yeah.
There's nothing harder than going from individual contributor as a salesperson to sales manager
Yeah.
and take all these unruly people
Yeah.
who do things unconventionally and figure out how to help them. What was that? What was one of the? Why did you make that leap into? Because when you could make more money
Yeah.
with less hours and
Yeah.
less headache staying a sales guy. Why did you become a manager?
That's a great question, Mark. I got to be honest. I would say to a degree, I was tricked into it. Right. So, as a successful salesperson, many times, right, what we see is that you just take the most successful salesperson, you say, hey, he's going to be the manager. That makes a lot of sense. And when I say I was tricked into it, what I think happened is they wanted to give me such a big quota when there was the discussion of, well, why do are you going to have this huge quota that's
Mm.
bigger than some of the districts have? Well, oh, but you'll kind of like be a manager, right? I think that kind of became into discussion. So it was more of like, hey, I'm tricking you into having this huge quota, versus, we really want you to admit. That's my perception, right?
So you did it. What slapped when you took that position? What slapped you in the face about your new leadership position?
I mean, I think, and you talk about this in some of your leadership books. Initially, I did it by just working really hard, doing some of the work for my team. I think that there was a tendency to tell them that they should do it exactly the way I did it, which worked with a large portion of the people that I hired. And, it allowed me to hire some people that were mini me's, but eventually it didn't scale because there weren't enough mini me's out there. So those were some of the things that I struggled with that I think are similar to things I've heard on your podcast and in your books.
So let's take the people who weren't mini yous. How did you learn to start recognizing different personalities, the strengths of different personalities, and helping people kind of lean on those and be successful?
I mean, I think it was when I hired some people and they weren't successful. And I had to figure out, well, am I going to go through and ask these people to exit the organization? Or am I going to figure out if they have some strengths that I can leverage? I think the other thing that I found with certain people is that they were able to be mini me's, but then I found that they had some other things that they did that were superpowers that I didn't even know I should tell them to leverage. So those are some of the things that I started to recognize and really expand on, you know, just the view of, how somebody could get things done that wouldn't be exactly the same as me.
Mm. So, as you grew and as your influence grew, what kind of lessons did you learn?
I think so. I give you an example. Not all the people that got transferred into my organization were successful. And so one of the lessons that you have to learn as a manager or even a second level manager is how you evaluate your people, and then how you, as quickly as possible, figure out, well, can you help manage them better? Can you work with them in a way that they can be successful? Or, because they didn't have the right tools or they didn't have the right mentorship? Or do you need to tell, hey, you're probably not a fit for this organization, you need to move on? So that, I mean, that's definitely a skill of a leader, is trying to
Mm,
figure out, hey, do you have the right people on the bus, right? Or do you need to show them, hey, this bus over here could be better for you?
yeah. Did you get a lot of training in how to figure those things out?
I did not get a lot of training. In fact, in one of my first couple of roles, I asked one of my leaders, who was a second level manager, "Hey, I think I need some mentorship. I don't think I'm doing this very well." And the response from this individual was, "You know what? You're not even close to my worst performer. I don't have a lot of time to spend with you," which is like, whoa.
Right.
So no,
You're not the you're not the broken wheel, so you get no time.
exactly. So I mean, I think there wasn't a lot of training. There were a few classes that I could go to, and I tried to go to every class that I could. I tried to watch people who I thought were good leaders. That really helped me, just watching them in a meeting or listening to them talk to their team. And then, of course, I read every book, listened to every
So
podcast.
what books did you listen to? What books did you read?
Um, for probably a period of 15 years, I read like 2 books a month, right? So I've read most books on leadership. We talked about, I mentioned one from Good to Great.
Hmm.
There were certainly a lot of lessons there. There were a lot of books that I read on sales in general. There were books on sales psychology that I read. Books like, I think there's a book called Difficult Conversations, right? That a book that I maybe it's called Crucial Conversations. Does that sound more?
There's Crucial Conversations. There's Radical Candor. There's a bunch of
Radical
books around
Candor.
that.
Yeah.
A friend of mine just wrote a book today, and with his wife, and it's called Difficult Conversations. So that's coming out today, actually,
Yeah,
as we're doing this.
so a long list. Maybe I'll look for some of those lists on the show notes. A lot of those are in my blog, which is just my first and last name.com. A lot of those I've reviewed, but maybe about 20% of the books that I read.
What difficult conversations were a surprise, and you had to learn to start to have effect to become effective?
I think it's not just having the difficult conversation, but it's also figuring out, how do I have this difficult conversation in a way that's going to make this person most receptive to the possibility of change. Right. So I never was one of those people who was afraid to tell somebody the truth or tell somebody they needed to change. So I didn't need to learn that. I've talked to people and mentored people that they were afraid to have the difficult
Hmm.
conversation. What I needed to do was have the difficult conversation in a way that somebody could receive it, without being so hurt that they weren't going to be able to take any action.
So that was trial and error, I'm sure.
That was trial and error, but it was also reading some of the books and then trying some of the things that were suggested in the books, and then eventually realizing, hey, actually, some of this does work.
So you're one of the most again, you're one of the most talented people I know and I've met throughout my career, and I watched you raise a family,
Mm-hmm.
and you have your faith and you have your values and you have a certain way of moving through life. And remember, we talked about that 24-year-old kid
Yeah.
who was a bull in a china closet and was like single-minded. And then as your career started to grow, you started to bring other things into your life to have, rather than just be successful, to have a more rounded life. Talk about that. Like, how did you start to see that there were things outside of work that were more important
I
or
mean,
as
I guess
important?
what I would say is, when I was young in my 20s, my goals for life were not that big, and they were focused, right? So my main goal was really just to make enough money um, to support my family in a basic way. There were some challenges growing up around money. I
Hmm.
didn't want to have those challenges affect my family in a negative way. And that was really my only goal for life in my 20s. And I kind of reached that by 30. And, at 30, I was kind of in despair because I reached, which wasn't really that high of a level of goal, but I was able to reach that. And I probably spent like 2 or 3 years confused with, hey, I reached the goals that I had for
Yeah,
myself.
there was the boat and things like that.
Well, I mean, and I maybe turned to some things that weren't that rewarding. I mean, and I do like boating and I do like some of those things. And I think everybody has that tendency to go after something material, and you realize that some of those material things are nice if they benefit some
Mm,
of your relationships, but they can be a distraction from what's really going to feed your soul. So it took me a couple of years before I started to realize, hey, I need to do some things to feed my soul, or I did some things by accident, like develop some of these relationships that I said, wow, that's really what was enjoyable about what I accomplished. Not 200% of your number, or going to sales club, or even a year where I had everybody on my team make President's Club. Those were some of the things that seemed like, oh, that's amazing. But they're not things that I think about on a regular basis. I do think about what I helped somebody do for their career, if I helped somebody get promoted, or just what the relationship means to me
mm,
of somebody that I've seen grow, or somebody that I'm proud of.
mm. You took some time off.
I did. I did. I took about 14 months off pretty recently. I was unsure if I was retired, or at least retired from making money. I did a few fun and adventurous things, but I spent most of my time working with Afghan refugees. I had no expertise in it, but there was a need.
Like they would know whether or not you had expertise. They just need help.
Yeah, they needed help. I was super willing and super available, and I was able to meet that need.
So how do you find the courage to take a break like that? Because again, when you became manager, that was when I had my kind of first breakdown of this, just the stress of it all. And I took 4 months off,
Yeah,
and I came back and realized you actually it's hard to come back to that. But I had to take the time off. Like
yeah,
I just couldn't function anymore. You made a choice. You have kids in college, you
yeah,
have responsibilities. You're very successful, but you're not what you would call rich.
no,
To so that it, like you could say, oh, now that's easy for Kurt to make
yeah, yeah,
that thing. It had to be a choice.
yeah.
How did you find the courage to do that?
Well, first off, I will say that the decision was made for me. So I was working at a place, and we had some differences of opinion. I asked, the board and the CEO that I reported to, if they would be willing to change some of the expectations that they had.
Mm,
They said no, and so we decided to part ways. So that part was made for me.
mm,
The choice to say I was not going to seek another job, and that I was going to work with refugees. Initially it was until I figure out what was next. After a period of time, I was thinking that it could be for the rest of my life. But yeah, so part of it was made for me, but the next step was kind of made by me. And you mentioned faith. I feel like that was something that God put in my heart,
mhm.
or an opportunity that was given to me, and I said yes to it.
I would question whether or not it was done for you, because a lot of people would conform and not speak up and say things need to be different,
Yeah,
because again, they need that paycheck, they
yeah,
want that
yeah.
paycheck. So how does that change your perspective of life? Because now you're back,
Mhm.
you're VP of sales, you're with another organization. We'll talk about that in a sec. But now, how does that change the way you come back to work after spending so much time in a heart centered kind of focus?
Yeah, I mean, I used to be pretty hard on people. Maybe even somebody would describe me as rigid in a certain way. Hey, meetings are at this time. Everybody is in the office at this time. And if
My
you,
ex-wife would call you rigid, because when we were in Barcelona
yeah,
together, she would say, Kurt's like, we're gonna meet at 7:30 for dinner. We better be at dinner.
and I mean that you should be waiting there at 7:24. right? Not
I
7:30.
still remember this 20 years later that like we can't be late for dinner. Kurt's gonna be pissed.
Yeah, so if I can give you like the ultimate example of maybe giving somebody flexibility, I recently hired a um, early in career person. He was a graduate of Catholic University. I'll give a shout out to a mutual friend of ours, Mark Weber, who gave the referral. So this young man, I thought was incredibly promising, but it got to the interview process. I'm about to give him the offer, and he says, "Oh, by the way, I'm good starting in June, but I need to take August off." Right. And for somebody that literally is starting and then 4 weeks later is going to take a month off, at 20 or 30, I would have said, "Hey, hit the road, man." But we just, had a conversation about what was important. It wasn't incredibly crucial to running the company that he couldn't take
Mm.
the month off. He was willing to take it as unpaid leave. So that would be, to me, is an example of something I never would have considered giving somebody that opportunity when I was 20 or 30.
Have your daughters noticed a difference in you having changed your focus for a little while?
I think so, right? My oldest daughter has a similar personality to me. We used to fight a lot because, hey, I have this way that I want to do it. She has the way that she wants to do it. We used to argue about it. I have my wife to thank a lot, where she pointed out, like, do you really need to argue about these things? Or all these things really, really crucial? And so I've learned with things that even when things are really important or something that I want to impart to my daughter, um, especially if she's gotten older, it's a suggestion or something I'm willing to help with, not a directive.
Hmm. Okay, so you decide to come back into the workforce. What in and I love what you talked about the company and why you came back
Mm.
into the workforce. What drew you back?
So I think the reason why I decided to stop working, Mark, is I had some incredibly great opportunities. Those opportunities paid well. They were with the companies that everybody would love to work with. But unfortunately, I don't feel like that the people there, at least from my perspective, that they really cared, or that the interactions with those people fed my soul. In fact, it left me drained, and just I felt like the soul was sucked out of me in some of these opportunities. And I even had a conversation with one person that I worked for, and there was a discussion. Well, what we're paying you, it shouldn't matter,
Right.
right? And it did matter.
Get your love from a puppy.
Yeah, and it did, and I realized it did matter. And so this particular company, I wasn't looking to work full time. They had some problems that I thought I could help with. My idea was, hey, I could give you some recommendations. I can consult with you a little bit, but I never envisioned that I would work with them full time. And so they asked me the question, well, why won't you at least meet our leadership team? And I said, well, of course I'll meet your leadership team. That would be stupid to say no to that. So I met these people, and I was really impressed with both their character and their ability to execute, and then just demonstrating how much that they cared about their employees
Mhm.
and their teammates. And when I saw that, the industry that they were in, or whether I understood anything about having people that went out in trucks and shredding hard drives, or whether I was an expert in sustainability, that didn't matter. It just mattered that, hey, these are people that I want to work with and I want to be around every day. And if I can contribute to that, then that seems exciting and fun.
So see, so it's so interesting that drew you back. It's not what the company did, although what you like, you found that what the company did is so much more important than you even knew about,
Yeah.
right?
And I did care about sustainability. So you probably know that I've done some sailing, that I've seen water bottles swirling around the ocean. We talked when we were up there, hey, don't give me a plastic water bottle.
Yes.
So I cared about sustainability but it didn't mean that I was an expert in
But
these aspects.
what you told me was when you saw what they did, you didn't realize the breadth of the impact,
I did not
and
at
that you were
all.
really interested in that. But it was the people,
Yeah.
who they were. It's who you wanted to hang out with, which tells me, and I'll ask you the question, but it tells me that, especially in this economy, that creating a work environment that doesn't suck people
Yeah.
dry for the paycheck will make a huge difference in the productivity and the profitability and in the longevity of your relationship with people. What do like, now that you're this wise older guy,
Okay.
what would you impart on organizations from what you learned through your career trajectory, that more important, that you would love to infuse into some of those companies that you do used to work for?
Well, I mean, I think that sometimes you have to pay people a lot of money in certain jobs because one, they hate it, and then two, they have to spend a lot of money on other things to try to fill the hole that is inside of them, right? I mean, you're a coach, right? Well, what do? You take people that probably have holes inside of them and give them steps that they could take to fill those holes, right? There's, whole industries around therapists, certain types of yoga. There's people that go out and buy a mega yacht or a G6, right, to try to fill those holes, right? And so there are a lot of people out there that are seeking, hey, I've got to make this amount of money, and it's to try to spend money on all these things that are trying to fill their soul.
Work hard, play hard.
Yeah, work
Right.
hard, play hard. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I see that, and it would be so interesting to be able to kind of marry the two, so that it's not soul sucking, and you don't have to, because it's interesting. I got a call yesterday from someone who said that this person who's a senior executive in this organization that she is friends with, collapsed in an airport,
Hmm.
and collapsed in the airport because of the stress of the job.
Yeah.
Right. And the agreement that we make to be in the 1%, we're willing, and again, the reason I'm a coach is because I've been seeing people willing to sacrifice their marriages, their physical health, their mental health. We know people who have died early, and I believe that there's a way of running these super profitable, super growth companies without destroying people.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I mean, just to give you an example of the life that I lived, I mean, after quarter ends, typically I had migraines, right? I didn't know what it was at the time, but I had a couple of panic attacks, right? I thought maybe I'm having memory loss or some type of other issue. And so those things eventually affect you in very negative ways, right? And
but nobody would know. See, nobody would know that you had panic attacks. Nobody would know that you had migraines. And I've talked to so many people that I used to work with, who, after I became a coach, they'd call me and say, they tell me what they're dealing with in order to do that. And it's just, again, the way you're talking, it doesn't need to be necessary, because I see Securus having you there is going to grow exponentially, and it's going to grow in a way that's going to feed the people that are working there.
Well, that's my hope, Mark.
So you have a blog?
I do have a blog.
We're going to put the link in the show notes for there. And you're working at Securus, and people can connect with you on LinkedIn.
I do respond to LinkedIn. I do already have life insurance. So if you're reaching out for life insurance, I'll probably thank you politely. But if you just have questions or want to learn, or there's some way I can help you, I enjoy helping people. I don't always have time to help everybody. But if,
Well, now he's full-time employed, so
yeah, but I mean, if I can, find a way to talk to you while I'm in an airport or in the car, or point you in the right direction, I enjoy doing that.
That's great. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for 20 some odd years of really an essential relationship for me. I appreciate
Well,
that.
Mark, I learned things from you that affected me. So I saw how some of the decisions that you made. If you remember, I volunteered to be one of your I don't even know what you call it when you were getting your coaching certifications.
Guinea pig.
Yeah, and I looked at it initially as, hey, I'm just doing my buddy Mark as a favor, but I started to learn things and I started to follow what you were doing. So I think the feeling is mutual.
Definitely. Thank you. And to everybody else, I hope you learned something from Kurt. I learned something from Kurt all the time. Again, follow your heart. If you know, if we were just talking about some of the hidden challenges to the success that we have in life. You don't have to have both. My mission in life is that you have the success and you have the full life. Thank you for your time and attention. I love you. Have a great rest of the day. How do we stop? There we go. They changed.